She won the Penn Faulkner, the Story Prize, and the LA Times Book Prize, and was a National Book Award finalist. Brandon Taylor's first novel, Real Life, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. But perhaps even more enviably, his collection, Filthy Animals, got him interviewed by Seth Meyers, which I am not sure, but may be the first time in history that a writer of literary short stories has made it to late night TV. So with no more ado, we'll get on to it. Brandon, the book festival put you up in the Flanders house, which was built in the 1700s, and this morning a ghost ripped your laptop plug out and threw it across the room, so that sucks.
True story. Happened to me. I plugged in my laptop, went across the bed to get something, and by the time I come back, the plug was pulled out, and not just like pulled out, but like thrown across the room. And it's very alarming, but also kind of comforting. I come from Alabama, and Alabama is a very haunted state, so I felt like I was right at home.
So I loved the array of responses to your tweet about this. Many people just very hard-nosed, like you should check the wiring at that place. Sounds like an electrical flaw. Haven't you watched any movies? Don't you know this is the time to leave the house? So Deesha, how's your crib?
Oh my gosh, blissful, blissful, blissful. I'm at Monita von Opel's boathouse. So
Very nice.
Envy me.
Very nice. Okay. So this is just a roundabout way of saying that a sense of place is very important in all your stories. It's almost like another character in each of these stories. That ghost is rumbling.
Is this mic?
Oh. Good. Technical genius. Must be all that corporate whatnot. So, sense of place. But often for both of you, it's a very uncomfortable place. And would you like to talk about that, Deesha?
Yeah, as soon as you said place, I immediately thought physical place, but also emotional and psychic space. The characters in my story, there's a lot of longing for a place of belonging, even if sometimes that place is within your own body, and in particular for Black women, in particular is in relationship to the constrictions and the constraints that some of us have learned growing up in church. And so that was one of the things that I want to grapple in the stories. How do you get free? How do you find your place? How do you get comfortable in the place of your own body even?
Right. What was Jacksonville like as a place?
So I always have to preface and say I left Jacksonville right before I was 18. So Jacksonville for me is always going to be, nostalgia. It was the place where I grew up, and it will always feel like family and home. But I didn't experience it as an adult, and I observed more of the kinds of things that are in my book than I experienced. As a girl, I was curious about Black women inside and outside of the church, and so I did a lot of watching, which as writers, we should do. So fast forward in my adulthood, when I started writing, it was those women that I remembered.
Wait,
I think I lost.
No sound.
No sound?
I don't know what happened.
Brandon? You're our technical person. You lost sound too. Okay.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
The ghost.
It goes.
Oh, no power.
I love how we all went.
Welcome to Martha's Vineyard.
I can project.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we do? Okay, we'll just have to use our outside voices. Yeah.
Okay.
So you were saying?
Yes. So in my early 30s, when I started, late 20s, early 30s, when I started writing, it was that nostalgia for Jacksonville and those memories of Black women, Black church women, that's where I reach back to start writing stories.
Okay. And you talked about, and you moved to Pittsburgh after Yale?
Shortly after,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you might not clap when you hear the next bit because she says that she wanted to leave Pittsburgh for a place where Black thriving is by design. Is there yet such a place?
I don't know. I put it out into the Twitter universe to ask the question, where is there a Black place where is there a place where Black thriving is by design and not happenstance, and where success like ours is not an exception, but possible for more Black writers and Black people, given Pittsburgh and the limitations there. Pittsburgh has been frequently noted as the most livable city in America, while its own city studies found that it is most unlivable for Black Pittsburghers, particularly Black women. So how can both of those things be true? And that's something that I started writing about during the pandemic. Yeah.
Brandon, what about the places that are important to you, even as uncomfortable as they sometimes are?
That's a great question. I was thinking about when Deesha said that, the things in her book are more observed than experience, and that she had never lived there as a mature observational intelligence. And I think that's very similar for me. I grew up in Alabama. I'm from Alabama. All my family lives in Alabama. But I feel like I never quite lived there as an adult. And the first place that I felt that I was a mature observational intelligence in the world is the Midwest. And so people often ask me, like, why do you write about the Midwest if you're from Alabama? And I'm like, well, I don't know what adults are really like in Alabama. Like, I know what they're like from the perspective of being like a kid and from being like a growing up there, but I don't know what it's like to sort of encounter adults as a peer, as I don't know what young adults think when they're living in Alabama exactly. And so it just made more sense for me to write characters who are in the Midwest, but specifically characters who have been displaced to the Midwest, often from the South. Because I think that sort of degree of removal, that degree of exile feels somehow deeply integral to my work, because I've never quite felt at home anywhere, even when I was in Alabama. And so I feel that place haunts my work in the same way that, the great traumas of history haunt many of us, And so my characters are in the Midwest, but they're haunted by the South, they're haunted by family, they're haunted by history. And I feel that I'm always writing into this idea that the past is a country to which you can never repatriate. It's always this ever-receding horizon. And so for me, place is more a mood, like it's more a vibe than anything else. And I feel that my characters are always longing for a place like Deesha, that place where thriving is by design. It's sort of, almost platonic ideal of a place that will feel like home, but of course home is, I think in my work especially, home is just an illusion all the time.
You've both spoken about writing out of sheer misery. Brandon, I mean, you wrote your acclaimed first novel, Real Life, in under 5 weeks, which made me want to hate you.
Listen.
So much until I found out why. And could you talk about that?
So when I wrote that novel, I considered myself a short story writer, and I still consider myself a short story writer, but I had this really pushy literary agent who kept asking for a novel, and I realized that I was never going to be able to live my best life as a story writer until I wrote this novel and got him out of my hair. And so I sat down and I tried to be very honest with myself, and I made a few lists. So one was a list of reasons I'd failed to write a novel before. One was a list of my strengths as a writer. One was a list of my weaknesses as a writer. And I sort of triangulated my way sort of algorithmically to like a plan to like write a novel in the shortest amount of time possible. And so I did it, but I mean, people are often like, oh, I wish I could write a novel in 5 weeks. Like, no, you don't. Like, I promise you don't, because like writing a novel in 5 weeks ruins your life. Like writing a novel in 5 weeks will ruin your life in ways that you never thought imaginable. So for that 5 weeks, I was still working 15 hours a day in a lab. And so I would go to lab in the morning, work until like 9 p.m. and then start my night shift and be doing assays. And while things were incubating, I would like write, 10,000 words or 5,000 words or something. And when you crawl into a novel, you kind of leave your life behind. and so I had no friends, I didn't sleep well, I didn't eat well, and I didn't write for 9 to 10 months after I finished the first draft of the book. And so it was this really intense burst written so that I could please this agent, who I then fired literally 2 weeks after I finished the book. But yeah, I wrote it for very mercenary reasons, that novel.
Well, sucks for him, but but you and that sustained misery, because in a way you were standing in the very misery you were writing about, because it is a campus novel about a biochemist and about all the microaggressions and macroaggressions and hideous experiences of having been given this opportunity but not supported to take it.
Yeah, one of the reasons I realized that I had not written novels because I would waste all this time like trying to imagine everything, and so I was like, I'm just gonna take the surface from my life and just write a novel about it. And the other reason that I sort of set the novel in that world is that as a reader, I love campus novels. I just love reading about academics, all their petty politics and rivalries. And it was I love dwelling in that world as a reader, but it would have felt dishonest to write a very chirpy campus novel that didn't speak to the complexities of what it's like to be a Black queer person in a sort of ostensibly progressive liberal enclave like in the Midwest, and to not sort of do those experiences justice. And so the misery crept in. Like it started out great and then it just got worse and worse and worse, because I'd be like, yes, he's gonna go to the lake with his friends, so idyllic, it's late summer, I'm like, oh, it's so perfect and beautiful, and then someone does something racist, and then you've got to like account for that in the book. And so the book got bleaker and more miserable as it went on, and I was like, wow, it is just like grad school.
And then the reviews of it were just like one exercise in white fragility after another, right?
Yeah, well, I will say that for the most part, the reviews were really wonderful and very generous, but there was this strain of people who thought that I had not been nice enough to the white people in the book. They're like, these white people are just stock characters. And I was like, well, when you read Jeffrey Eugenides, like the Black people are stock characters and nobody complains about that. So like, what is the problem? But no, the review, there was I feel like the most consistent strain of criticism of the novel was that I had not deeply imagined how painful it was also for the white people, and I was just like, well, that is not my project. So yeah, there was some white fragility, but I accept that criticism. Fine, I accept it.
No.
It's okay.
I have to, as an aside here, urge everybody to read on the web magazine Brevity.
Yes.
Okay, this is a must-read, talking about being nice. And it is a pop quiz for white women who complain about that Black women.
It's a pop quiz for white women who want Black women to be nicer in conversations about race. I wrote that, right before the 2016 election, because there were a lot of conversations happening around race and a lot of failures around intersectional, feminism. And I found myself repeating myself, which I hate to do. And so I started hearing from, sounds like people that reviewed your book about, if you would just, meet me for coffee. You would see that we have more in common than we have different, and have that are different. So I wrote this quiz that you're referencing. It's a hermit crab essay. I was talking about this in a workshop I was teaching yesterday. So it's an essay that takes the form of something ordinary. In this case, it's like the kind of quiz you would read in Cosmo. But I took all of the things that I had found myself saying in these exhausting conversations about race, and I made it a pop quiz. And so I would just, once it got published at Brevity, I would post that link and I said, take this quiz, and if you still want to have coffee with me, let me know. And to date, no one has wanted to have coffee with me. So, and as you said, I accept that.
Fine. Sounds great.
Can you talk about when you started to write? Mm-hmm. It was kind of out of misery, but unexpected, right? Because you had everything that you thought you...
Exactly. I was a good church girl. I did all of the things in the right order. I was married, and then I had children. I was married heterosexually. And I was dissatisfied. But I wasn't confident enough in my late 20s, early 30s, when I first started writing, to write about my own experiences. But then those church women were still, coming back to, they were still in my imagination, still in my memories. And so I started writing as I imagined their lives to be, and I gave them my dissatisfaction. That's how I started. And as you were saying, you take that kernel of your own life, and then you can build on it. And so it was a lot of my childhood remembrances, but now I'm a woman and I can better imagine what some of those women were grappling with. And it felt a little subversive too. I was living, as you said, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was living unhappily in the suburbs, and so I imagined these other worlds, and sex was always sort of at the center of it. And someone asked me recently, why sex? Why is there so much sex in the book? And I said, it's, not that I'm obsessed with it, the church is obsessed with it. And it's particularly obsessed with controlling women's sexuality, controlling women's bodies and reproduction. And so if I'm going to write about the church and women, you can't write about the church and women without writing about sex. And so that was coming up very organically for me. I couldn't have articulated why back then. There was so much I didn't know back then. This is a lot of, hindsight. But at the time, that's what felt urgent for me, that even if I couldn't articulate my own dissatisfaction because I believed I should be happy because I had all the things, I could give it to these women, and I could imagine their stories and put it out in that way. And then as I grew as a writer, I started to realize, okay, I can write essays. I can actually write the truth, the truth of my life, and then separately, the fiction was a separate part of it.
And you said that as a little girl you would be sent to church,
yes,
but your mom and your grandmom didn't go with you.
Yes.
And you asked them about that.
Yes, I asked my grandmother only once because it was clear she didn't want to talk about it. And she said, I'll go to church when I get myself together or get right. And even as a child, I was confused because I thought that's why you went to church. But she didn't feel welcome at church, and neither did my mother. And, my grandmother raised me, so she was like another parent. And so for a long time, we don't see our parents as people. So I didn't remain curious about that. I went on with my life. Only in having conversations like this one about this book and having that question did I start to think, oh, wait, my mother and my grandmother were both single mothers. At that time, that was a huge deal. That's why I didn't feel welcome at church. But they didn't, they weren't sort of thumbing their nose at the church and the establishment and the rules that made them feel unwelcome, because they sent me. So it was like, there's still hope for me. They still bought into that system. And it was like, well, you can be saved, literally. And so I've had to really sit with what that means, and it just dawned on me because I've spent so much of my life just sort of dismissing that fact. But I think it's pretty profound, and I didn't think I was writing this book for them, but in many ways I think I was.
Right. And you said that you thought that perhaps white women could relate to such a centralized black woman's experience, but you weren't sure if they would. What do you think now?
They have. I've heard it. As Brandon was saying, a lot of the books that we read and we're told are classics, it's this universal story, but we don't see people that look like us in there, but we're expected to look at these very specific lives and believe that it's universal and we can relate. Well, the reverse is true as well. Toni Morrison told us that. August Wilson told us that you can write about the specificity of Black life and tell universal stories about love and freedom and honor and all of these things. And it's a choice for people who aren't Black to find those connection points. And so, so many have been harmed by the church, and they can connect with these stories. There's a lot of mother-daughter stuff in here, and, lots of us can connect in that way.
Yeah.
So there are connection points.
Right. Absolutely. So many, and I don't want to leave sex behind without addressing it more directly. These are such sexy, sexy books, and I have pulled out two. I've just pulled out 2 lines. I don't want this to go all X-rated here, but I just have to. So here's Deesha. This is my favorite bit. I push down gently on the inside of her thighs till she is open like an altar. I am speaking in tongues.
Woo! Beulah, thank you.
Oh my.
And now Brandon.
Oh
To feel hot all over with need and the slick gathering wet that sluiced the glide into desire.
Stop.
So you write really beautifully in. You've got my copy.
I left mine in the inn with the ghost. Sorry.
There are recurring characters in these short stories circling each other, and you get different points of view. And the most significant central relationship is what's going on between a Black character and 2 white dancers. And in the telling of the emotional rifts and fingernails down a blackboard that these 3 characters are subjecting each other to is also an incredibly elegant and deeply felt appreciation of dance. And I figured you had to be a dancer, but then I heard that was not the case.
Yeah, no, I'm not a dancer. I wanted to be. When I was a little kid, I desperately wanted to take ballet lessons, but my mom wouldn't let me because she said that it would make me gay. But then I was...
That ghost.
The ghost.
I guess it's a homophobic ghost.
I guess she maybe doesn't want me to tell that story. But yeah, so I was going to be a dancer, and then I was not going to be a dancer anymore. But I've always loved dance. I've always been very curious about dance, and I always wanted to write about dance, but I didn't really know the words or the lexicon for it. So I just went around thinking I would never be able to do it. But then I watched this video of World Ballet Day, which is this international, I can hear myself, this international initiative of, or is it me? Who knows?
Maybe if you speak into it.
Maybe, I don't know.
No. Okay.
Okay, is it back? Am I back? No. Okay, I'll just talk. We got it. Okay. So I wanted to write about dance, but I didn't have a way in until I saw this video of ballet dancers practicing. And the reason that was a way in for me is because I come from a family of football players. All my cousins are all giants, and they're all very athletic, but I never did that, obviously. But so I saw these ballet dancers practicing, and I was like, oh, I know what practice is. I know what physical rigor is. I know what the pursuit of physical mastery in an endeavor is, because my cousins all did football camp from the time we were 5. So I was I know how to write about this now. I know how to write about the sort of physical dimension of dance, and that was my way in. And so then I found my way into ballet and sort of writing about ballet. And the reason that I was able to sort of, I think, recreate some of the toxic dynamics in ballet programs is because like any other very insular, self-selected community, it's full of petty rivalries and infighting. And I was like, I know so much about that. So I had the physical dimension, and I also knew the petty social side of it. And I was like, that's just ballet. That's just what it is. It's like practicing a lot, eating not enough, being obsessed with your body, and also hating people who have more talent than you. And I know about all those things. So that was my way into I found the human side of it, and I sort of was able to take it from this very rarefied artistic form and to find the sort of meaty human side to it.
I really admire what you did with that, and I totally see how it's not that different to a lab.
Not at all, in fact.
And also, and then the sheer cruelty that you encountered at the Iowa Writers Workshop. I'm still gobsmacked that they don't let you talk when they're critiquing your stories. Can you tell about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, the way that I know that like a white man came up with the idea of a workshop is that it's you sitting in a room with 12 people who think they know your work better than you do, talking at you for 4 hours, and you're not allowed to respond. And if that is not like the paternalistic structure, I don't know what is. But yeah, I mean, it was very brutal. I mean, I found it really difficult. And I was there for 2 years. I did the program, but at the end of my first semester, I was ready to leave because I had not found. I sort of went into that program thinking I was going to find the teacher who was going to help me perfect my art, and I was going to find all these great friends, and we're all going to support each other, just like in the movies. And instead, it was just like this place where they bring you there, and they're like, well, you're here, now write. And my teachers weren't super duper interested in being teachers, and my classmates, they had better things to do than be my friend. And so it was just very challenging. I had no guidance, no direction, and I don't know how I got through that program. Honestly, it was totally brutal. But yeah, I mean, can you imagine sitting in a room where someone dissects your story down to the most minute comma for 2 hours, and it's 12 people telling you that your story is bad, and you can't say anything except at the end when they give you 2 minutes to ask any questions you might have of the room.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a recipe for not learning anything. It's amazing they ever turn out any writers. But I did want to ask you, so your mum was afraid that if you did ballet you'd turn gay, and how was coming out to them?
Well, the way that I came out was that I went away to college, and I decided that I was going to live my life as though I had already come out, and so I just like never said anything, and I was just gonna like live my life because people like nowadays people are all about the coming out story, like, oh yes, but people forget like during Bush's America, it was not like that. Like it was not the glorious coming out story. There were no gay people even in commercials. I turn on the TV now and there's like gay couples all over commercials, and I'm like, wow, I would never have imagined it. And so during, Bush's America, coming of age as a queer person, it was this period of time in which I feel like queer youth was very much like, I'm not going to let anyone dictate the terms of my life to me. I don't have to come out. And it was also like this fiery, desperate need for affirmation. So it was like this conflict. But for me, I just decided I was going to live like I had already come out. And so I wasn't going to tell anyone that I was gay. I was just going to live as though I had. And like that seemed to work until like my brother called me once, this was years later, he goes, so like how's it going up there in Wisconsin? This is like after I graduated and moved to Wisconsin. He's like, so how's it going up there in Wisconsin? I'm like, oh, it's going great. He goes, so you can find yourself a girlfriend yet? And I was like, whoa. I thought that this had already, and in fact, I did not realize the degree to which this plan had not worked until I was on Seth Meyers in June of this year, 10 years after I thought I'd come out. And if someone from home was like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you're living your truth. I'm so glad. Like they took me on Seth Meyers saying that I was gay as me coming out to them. And I was like, wow, if I had to pick the way to come out to my incredibly Baptist Southern family, maybe not on national television. It was this like mind-melting thing where I thought I had been living an authentic out life as a gay man for many years. Indeed a decade. And in fact, no, they just thought that I was just an eccentric living Which I think is, it's great. I mean, it's wonderful. Yeah. That's my coming out story. I'm sure once this live streams are going to get more, I'm going to be coming out to more people. You're all party to my coming out party. Thank you so much.
So I think it's really important to say that both of these books are just unbelievably beautifully written, and I love words and sentences, and these books both have such exquisite voices, so I don't usually go in for reading at these things because you can read for yourself, but just in this case, I would like you both to read something so that anyone who's not familiar with the work yet gets how absolutely, and I know that you hate when somebody says your work is raw and visceral, and I get that because it is so not raw. It is so cooked. It is so finely, culinarily masterpiece crafted, every single image in it. So take it away. Who's going to go first? Deesha.
Okay. I'm going to read an excerpt from a story in the collection called Snowfall. And since I'm reading from the middle, I'll just tee it up by saying that the we that the narrator refers to is a woman named Arlita, and she's referring to herself and her girlfriend Rhonda, and they live in a very cold place that Pittsburghers recognize as Pittsburgh when they read this, but they have moved there from the South, and I think that's all you need to know to get this. We were born and raised in warmer places, Georgia and Florida. Warmer, too, in the residual charm, polite smiles, and gentility of the white people whose ancestors owned ours. In the South, the weather does not force tears from your eyes, causing the faces of passing strangers to register worry about you for a millisecond. It's the wind, you want to tell them, but a millisecond is not enough time. In the South, the weather does not hurt you down to your bones or force you to wake up a half an hour early to remedy what has been done to your steps, your sidewalk, your driveway, and your car as you slept. But the South has hurricanes, they say. Yes, but not damn near daily, not for a full quarter of the year. You tell people up here that you're from the South, and 9 times out of 10, they say the same old thing. I'm sure you miss the sunshine. Rhonda and I both miss taking sunshine and easy morning commutes for granted. But what we really miss are the laughter and embrace of our mothers and grandmothers and aunties, kin and not kin. We miss the big oak tables in their dining rooms where, as kids in the 70s and 80s, we ate bowl after bowl of their banana pudding as they talked to each other about how much weight you'd gained, like you weren't even there. We miss helping them snap green beans and shell peas, sitting at their kitchen tables, watching The Young and the Restless on the TV perched on the pass-through. We miss how they loved Victor Newman, hated Jill Foster, and envied Miss Chancellor and how she dripped diamonds and chandeliers. We miss their bare brown arms reaching to hang clothes on the line with wooden pins. We miss their sun tea, brewed all day in big jars on the picnic table in the backyard, then later loaded with sugar and sipped over plates of their fried chicken in the early evening. We miss lying next to them at night in their 4-poster beds with 2 soft mattresses covered by iron sheets and 3-generation-old blankets. We miss their house coats, perfumed with absorbing junior liniment and hints of the white shoulders they'd spritzed on from an atomizer that morning before church. We miss tracing the soft folds in their skin when we held their hands and watched our favorite TV shows in their beds, Dallas, Dynasty, Knots Landing, and Falcon Crest. We miss how they laughed and were easy with each other, how their friendships lasted lifetimes, outlasting wayward husbands and ungrateful children. Outlasted that time Alma caught Joe cheating, and she whacked him on the top of the head with the sword he brought back from the war, but he told the people at the hospital he didn't know who did it. Outlasted having to hide your medicine bottles in your shoes because otherwise 7 of your 9 children were liable to steal them. We miss how they seemed to judge everyone but themselves. Or maybe that judgment was in the nerve pills they procured from the Chinese doctor on Bay Street who didn't ask questions. We missed their furtive cups of brown liquor on Friday and unabashed cries for Jesus come Sunday. We missed their one gold tooth that made us wonder who they had been as young women. We missed their blue crabs, the shells boiled to a blood red in wash tubs atop bricks over makeshift fires built in the yard. The wash tubs reminded us of cauldrons full of rock salt and cayenne-drenched water bubbling and rolling, mesh bags of seasonings and halved onions and peppers floating on top, along with potatoes and ears of corn. We miss how they stood over those cauldrons like witches stirring a potion, with sweat beading on the tips of their noses and smoke swirling around their hands and wrists. They wielded long-handled spoons to press the frantic, flailing crabs toward their deaths. We miss how they made our Easter dresses and pound cakes and a way out of no way. But we lost all those things when we chose each other. Only the memories remain, which is why, even though we grew up in different places, so many of our bedtime conversations start with, "Remember when?" As we lie there in the dark with our nostalgia and nothing to distract us from it, not even each other, not anymore. Thank you.
Oh, that's so good.
Thank you.
Good.
It is.
Oh, what a vibe, honestly. I'm going to read, maybe keeping the theme going a little
Okay.
bit, I'm going to read from my story, Anne of Cleves, which is about, I'm going to read from the beginning, so you don't need to know anything except that it's about two women who fall in love, and one of them recently new to loving women. It's great, it's wonderful. So, Anne of Cleves. On their first date, Sigrid asked Marta which of Henry VIII's wives she most identified with, and Marta choked on her white wine. Sigrid repeated the question slowly, and with a dawning chill, Marta realized that she was serious. "I don't know much about that," Marta said, and Sigrid pressed her lips together in what looked like a condescending grin. Marta didn't know much about history. She didn't know much about dating women, either. She had recently broken up with a man named Peter after he asked her to marry him and move to Belize. Every time he kissed her, she could feel a part of herself looking away from him, towards something else that she could not then make out. But when, after 3 years together, he had asked her to marry him, two things suddenly resolved into sharper focus. That she had been with him only because being with him was easier than no longer being with him, and that she'd been waiting for a moment when this would no longer be the case. Sigrid looked at her glass and examined it, but she didn't seem like she was in a rush to change the subject. She had the sturdy, upright patience of an elementary school teacher. Her eyes were very green, Marta noticed. "You're not much of an Anne Boleyn," Sigrid said, and the name darted through Marta's mind like a swift silver fish. There was something there, a glimmer of recognition, or no, maybe just a desire to have the conversation over with. She had not thought much about history in some time, in years really. She had studied chemical engineering as an undergraduate, and now she worked at a waste processing plant in Baraboo. She might have told Sigrid this, except that the look on Sigrid's face, with its precise concentration, wedged inside her like a splinter. Definitely not a Catherine Howard. "I don't know who they are, but I'll take your word for it," Marta said. The wine was too sweet for her. She didn't much like wine. She preferred Coors or Old Milwaukee, beer of the pale, weak variety. It may have been the result of spending all her time in college around engineers who drank shitty beer and leaned over their notebooks and parsed their calculations long into the night. She had often woken up on their couches smelling sour and raw, with rulers stuck to her thighs. That's how she had met Peter and fallen in with him. They saw each other so much that it seemed natural that they should date, and when he asked her to the movies, she'd said, "Okay, all right, sounds good." Dating, yeah. On that first date with Sigrid, she was still sad about Peter and uneasy, and if this was how dating women was going to be, a series of increasingly esoteric questions, she wasn't sure she liked it that much either. "This won't work," Sigrid said, and Marta felt a little pulse of fear. What won't work? This, she said, gesturing wildly. You retreating, falling into silence. It won't work. I'm sorry, Marta said. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know anything about Henry VIII or whoever. That's fine, Sigrid said. You say that, except I told you before, when you asked me, that I didn't know much about it, and you kept going, so I don't know. It's fine, Sigrid said, and she leaned over the table and crossed her arms. I don't know about any of this, Marta said, making a circle with her hand to indicate Sigrid, Sigrid's half-eaten $20 orecchiette, her own empty bowl, which had contained a $15 bolognese, and their table, and their breadsticks. All of it. I don't know how to do it. These aren't even my pants. She had borrowed the wool slacks from her roommate, Katie, and Sigrid had complimented them when they'd first met outside the restaurant. She had felt guilt then, but had also felt good. It had been a long time since someone had complimented her. Even Peter, by the end of it, had stopped telling her that she was pretty. He used to do it just before he slid inside of her. He'd kiss her cheeks and say, "You're so pretty," and there he'd be, the blunt end of him, jabbing at the inside of her thigh. And she'd nudge herself apart to accommodate him, the way you might make room in the next chair for a stranger at the doctor's office. But, man, I tell you. But Sigrid, outside the restaurant, earlier that evening, the blue veil of late winter's twilight falling all around them, wind in her curly hair, had called her pretty and complimented her outfit. She felt itchy and anxious, like a librarian, dressed as she was in a cardigan and a nice blouse and the wool slacks. But she normally wore carpenter pants and stiff polyester to the plant. Sigrid had on leggings and a skirt and a magenta top. Marta had spent the evening admiring the slim, smooth column of her neck and the way the blouse had fluttered open just a little, revealing a mole on her chest. But Sigrid must have not remembered complimenting the pants, because she blinked once or twice and then smiled. Marta felt a plunging sense of dread, which had also made her smile back nervously, and it was like something cracked open. The rest of the night was easy.
All right. If you guys aren't going to run and buy those books after that, I don't know what's wrong with you. So we've got time for some questions. Do they have to use the microphone? Okay, there's one there and there's one over the back there. Yay.
Thank you. I just wanted to spend time just being with you all and just listening, because it's just gorgeous. Thank you so much. I have a question about the short story form, particularly the linked stories. And I think that, Brandon, that's what they called your collection. Mm-hmm. I have a sneaking suspicion that it's something that was created to sell as opposed to thing, but I'd love your thoughts about it, because I find it intriguing and I like it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah, so the linked story form was a form that I did not know existed. So I am a clingy reader. I really love characters. I hate letting them go. But I always thought that when you write a story, that is like saying goodbye not only to that character, but that world and that universe that you've spent all that time making. And it always made me really sad to finish a story. But then I came across the stories of the Canadian writer Mavis Gallant, who's one of my favorite writers, and she has this book called Varieties of Exile. And in that collection, there are all these linked stories. You know, she has her Lynette Muir stories, the Corrette sister stories, the Henri Griep stories, which are all really fantastic. And I was like, oh, like, you can write a character and then you don't have to say goodbye to them, but you also don't have to capitulate to the weird sort of structural needs of a novel. And so that's really how I found my way to the form. It's really my way of holding on to characters and asking deeper, more complicated questions about their lives without having to write a novel. So it wasn't made to sell, but I was happy that it did.
I want to say you guys are amazing. I enjoy this so much. And I'm just curious about, like, you talked a lot about place. So when you write, does place play into that, or does it not matter? And I also want to know what's next.
So place matters even when I don't name the place. And so for the stories in this collection, when I imagine that backyard crab boil, I imagine the backyard that I grew up in. And when I imagine, you know, the grandmother's houses and living room, I imagine, you know, my paternal grandmother's house. So this is all Jacksonville, Florida, but it wasn't so much about the place of Jacksonville, Florida, as it was the place of my childhood and my youth, where a lot of these memories, really fond memories, were formed. And then place also matters in terms of, as we talked about earlier, just sort of the interiority of the emotional and psychic space. And for me, that was that place of dissatisfaction and longing. And so I try to go to that place with the characters and sort of see where they are in that space. I used to say, only recently did I say I write about black women, or, these are Southern black women. I would always say I wrote about dissatisfied women, because it was that space of dissatisfaction that loomed larger to me, more so than a physical space. That said, it's not coincidental that my collection is a very Southern book. Even though I have not lived in the South full time since 1989, I still feel very Southern. I still, Pittsburgh is home. It's where my children grew up. But I feel displaced there. I have felt that way for some time. So I'll always kind of identify first and foremost as black woman and then Southerner in terms of place.
Yeah. What's next, Deesha?
What's next? more being Southern even more. Next fall, I'll be going to the University of Mississippi to be the John and Renee Grisham writer in residence.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then hopefully more brilliant books after that.
Yes, working on the next book, which will either be a novel or a short story collection. I make no promises.
Yeah, we were talking about that. You just can't get out of it. Short stories. For me, place is, like I said, I often think about place while I'm writing, but mostly in the way of where in the Midwest is this character gonna be and how did they get there? I always think of place as being a component of a character's history and as a component of their circumstances, even if they've left a place or they've arrived in a place. And I'm always thinking about maybe not place directly, but a character's relationship to the place, to all the places that they've inhabited in their lives. I find it like a really generative set of conditions to think about. And as for what's next, most directly is a novel called The Late Americans, which is about a group of young creatives set in Iowa City. And then after that is a novel called Group Show, which is about a fictional art museum in Madison, Wisconsin. And then I'm done writing about the Midwest because I'm working on a Southern Gothic. But stopping the Midwest after 4 books before coming back to it later, I'm sure.
Well, I guess if you can write them in 5 weeks, you can think 2 ahead. That's amazing. Question here?
Yes, I am unfortunately going to take you back to place because I find it such a fascinating thing for you to be so young. I'm nearly 70 and have lived my life in this idea of emotionally no place. So what I want to know now, in a very successful life, but as a black woman, those two things don't go together. You can still feel very much displaced. Yes. So I want to know where you all are now emotionally with regard to place. Personally, your own personal space.
Sure. Okay, first, we were just admiring your hair when you came in, so I have to tell you that.
Yes.
We just were like...
That's my good place.
Give people their flowers now.
Yes.
And, so I'm in a place of pandemic having the biggest success of my life. And that's a very confusing space sometimes. I realize I don't have to perform being okay for people, but when the different awards were being announced, those were really hard times for me because I was isolated in my house. So multiple things are true about that emotional space. There are times when I feel like I'm waiting for something to be over, but this isn't over yet, and then sort through sort of the wreckage of what's left and make sense of it. But right now, emotionally, I feel like I'm going. This engine going of a book tour and the next book. I'm also a parent. I have a daughter graduating high school next year and a daughter graduating college next year. So I feel like I'm in the emotional space of doing. And at some point, I've got to pause. I'm not sure when that's going to happen and sort of regroup and gather and would probably have a better answer for you then. But right now, I am in a space of doing, but also trying to find those times of rest. I have said no more than I ever have in my life, and no as a complete sentence without explanation. And thinking of it this way, every time I say no to something someone else wants me to do, I'm saying yes to myself. So that's where I am right now. Thank you for the question.
Oh yeah, I love no. I love no. I say no so much. I'm sure people get sick of hearing no from me. Because it is so easy just to burn yourself out and to capitulate to the world's needs and desires for you, especially like when you're just trying to break out because you want to say yes to everything because you don't know if the other opportunities will come. So I love a no, love like a hard no. But as for like where I am, I mean, I've spent my entire life in school. I started school when I was 4, and I finished my education in 2019. And it was the first time in my life where I was like, oh, I have finished my formal education. I've only ever lived places because I was born there or I was going to school there. I don't know who I am or like where I'm gonna go. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I was sitting in my apartment like everyone else over the pandemic, and I was like, I guess I'll just wait for the next phase. I'll just wait for the signal to come from on high. And then I was like, oh wait, I am the signal. It's like I am the one who gets to decide where I'm going to live and what I'm going to do and how I'm going to live and be in the world. And I'm like, oh, that is terrifying. I'm like, I have all this agency and I don't have a compelling reason to be anywhere. And for a long time I felt really anxious about that. And I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, all my friends are moving to New York for jobs, for school, for things. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I need someone to tell me when it's okay for me to make a choice about where I'm gonna be. And then my friends were like, Brandon, you are the someone who has to give yourself that permission. And it was just a really sort of lights on moment for me. I was like, oh, that is what it means to have come of age, when it is you who sets those terms. And so I'm moving to New York on August 20th. And, you know, people are often like, what are you going to do in New York? And I just keep being like, live, I guess. Because I don't have I'm just going there because I want to. And it feels like such a weird thing to be able to say, I'm going to go there because I want to, and because I want to is a perfectly valid and worthwhile reason, and I don't need anybody to validate that choice because it is a choice I made for myself, and whatever good or ill comes of that, you know, I'm willing and ready to take that on because that's what it means to act with agency in this world. And it feels somewhat revolutionary to be from like a working class, illiterate, rural Southern family and to sit on this stage as like a queer black man and be able to say like, I'm moving to New York because I want to.
Yes.
Because for so long that was like impossible, literally illegal and impossible. So I guess I'm in a place of agency and a place of because I want to.
What a great note to end on.